Hi, now I'm continuing to the next tutorial, that is day 12. So here I will be discussing the gradient descent, which is a fundamental optimization algorithm and is widely used in data science, particularly within machine learning and deep learning. Its primary purpose is to find the optimal parameters, that is weights and biases, of a model that minimize a given cost or loss function. This function quantifies the error between the model's prediction and the actual values. So in the left side of this slide, you can see the book chapter which is discussing about the gradient descent. That is the idea behind the gradient descent and how to write the codes. But if you understand the fundamentals of gradient descent, you don't need any detailed coding study. But instead, if you are familiar of the basic coding, then you can write in just few line codes. So, for example, this is one of the example taken from the same book. That is finding a minima using gradient descent. So here what it says, accordingly, one approach to maximize a function is to pick a random starting point and compute the gradient. Take a small step in the prediction of gradient and repeat the with the new starting point. Similarly, you can try to minimize a function by taking the small steps in the opposite direction. And this is what you are seeing in this figure. But to understand these minima, when you are discussing about gradient, then you need to understand some of the figures. For example, here, top left, that is showing the initial weight, incremental steps, derivative of cost, and minimum cost. That is what you see here in the mean here in the bottom. And then it says the gradient is somewhere here. Okay. So then there are some other ways of optimization. So if you have some different kind of lines, then how will you go to find some kind of local minima and the gradient descent and some other factors associated with gradient descent? So gradient descent is now the most widely used optimization approach while using machine learning or deep learning. And in general, the types of gradients are or gradient descents are batch, stochastic, and mini batch. So these three are the most common. Mainly we discuss about batch and stochastic. Mini batch is just like from the name you can understand. So the gradient descent is basically an optimization approach for locating a differentiable function's local minima. And then gradient descent is a technique for determining the values of a function's parameters to minimize a cost function to the greatest extent possible and is built on the convex function and iteratively modifies its parameter to minimize a function to its local minima. Now, I'm again saying, so please continue with subscribing the channel, because if you are attending the lectures, you should be updated with all the videos which I'm uploading in sequences, and you will be getting the updates. Now, the fluctuations, what is like the kind of fluctuation you could observe while you are performing batch or stochastic gradient descent? So One could be random way, another will be some kind of continuous. So wedge gradient descent converges to the minimum of the basin. That is what you saw in the this figure, first figure. Now, of the basin, the parameters are placed in and the fluctuation is small. Now, stochastic gradient descents fluctuation is comparatively large, but it enables to jump to a new and potentially better local minima. However, this ultimately complicates the convergence of to the exact minima, as stochastic gradient descent will keep overshooting. So this is obvious when you are extending the size, step size. Definitely you could miss something. So how in general gradient descent process works? So first step is initialize the parameters. Start with random values for parameters, then compute the gradients, calculate the derivatives of the loss function. Then update parameters, that is adjust parameters by moving opposite to the gradient. Then repeat until it converges. So continue until changes are minimal. Now, so basically, this is the final goal. When you are optimizing, then you are looking for how, when it reaches to the steady state or there is least changes. Now, if you are going to estimate the gradient, so this is one of the example if you are writing, then as I mentioned, if you understand, then you don't need to look for some big mathematics or small mathematics. You are clearly free if you understand the logic. What we need to measure, that means the changes, when it goes to minimum or there is no change, something like this. So this is what you need to understand and then write the code. So estimating the gradient of a curve at a specific point involves drawing a tangent line to the curve at the point and then calculating the gradient or the slope of the tangent line. This provides an estimate of the curve's gradient at that particular location, as the gradient line shares the same slope as the curve at the point of tangential. So these are some other kinds of derivatives and derivative estimations, which you could look. And you can see in the codes also, this is not complicated mathematics or coding pattern, because the mathematical equations are quite simple, which even class 6, 7, 8 people could understand what kind of mathematics are used here. So it is a school kind of mathematics. Now, when you are using the gradient, then you need to think what could be the right step size. So the step size is also matters while you are using gradient. So depending on the problem, you can look for the step size and perform the optimization process for different step sizes and then decide what could be the best step size for it. And for this, you need to write a small prototype code or module, which will easily tell you the exact way of optimizing and using the right step size. So now how the batch process could work? You could go for data points, database, and then optimization and final analysis. Now, stochastic gradient descent is an alternative optimization algorithm widely used in machine learning and data science for training models, particularly those with large data sets. It is a variant of the traditional gradient descent algorithm. So these are some other example how it looks like when you are using a stochastic gradient descent and when you are going for normal gradient descent. Then what are the terms which you need to be aware while you are using these gradient descent for optimization process, that is local minima, local maxima, global minima, global maxima. Now, variants of stochastic gradient descents are different. For example, you can go for balance, computational efficiency, and accuracy. Then accelerating minima, learning by accumulating past gradients. It improves momentum by looking ahead in gradient calculation. Adapts learning rates based on parameter history, then similar to AdaGrad, but with decaying learning rates. Combines momentum and adaptive learning rates. And this is, by the way, when you are saying it combines momentum and adaptive learning rates, so this is what it is called training, real training of your model. Then now it comes very basics of any coding. So this is also quite important for data science also, of course, because every time you need data as input file. So it is like file handling, database, and the nature of data. So data could be of different types, as I have mentioned. It can come from basic text file, plain text file. It can come from Excel sheet, Word file, PDF, web pages, or multiple sources. So the most common data files are delimited files or tab delimited files, then Excel sheets and some other kinds of. But if you are able to understand how the data and file handling takes place, you can handle all kinds of files, irrespective of .txt file, .xlx file, or .xml file, or some other kinds of file, JSON file or something else. So you need to understand what we need to look for when we are handling or outsourcing the data from different sources, whether from file, web pages, or some other stored databases. So then it comes working with data. So first thing is, what are the dimensions of the data? So you need to, when you load the file, then you need to evaluate what are the dimensions of the file. What are the rows and columns? Are there rows or only columns, or both rows and columns? Then, are these values texts or in character or values like numbers? Then, if you are clear about the pattern of data, file patterns, data patterns, row patterns, then it's quite simple to understand it. And in most of the codings, if you once import the file in your computer by using the code, then it will easily tell you in just one line that this is the file size, this is the number of rows and columns. Now, the data could be one-dimensional, two-dimensional, or three-dimensional, or multiple dimensions. So here, for example, when we are saying X and Y, that means two-dimension rows, I and J, two-dimension rows. So on X-axis, there is one value. On Y-axis, there is another value. So this is basically two-dimension. But when we are saying that this is for one specific case, that these X value and Y values are for one case, but we have hundreds of such cases, then it will be called as three-dimensional data. When you increase the complexity, the dimension of the data will increase. This is the only thing. And this is how computer stores all the data. Now, many dimensions and how to plot these data from the computer code. It will look like that this is so simple data, but when you are going to plot, you can plot so many figures because the dimension or complexity of the data is high. And then cleaning and monging, then manipulating data, rescaling the data. These are some basic things which you need to be always familiar. Then it comes when you have higher dimensions, more than two dimensions. Then you need to reduce the dimension in order to make it functional or use it for some kind of optimization or in different steps of your calculation. Now, in the next class, I will be discussing about machine learning and modeling concept. So thank you very much for today.